You ready to get the best shape of your life?
All right.
Oh, goodness.
Welcome back to another episode of the Train the Trainer podcast. We're really excited today to dive into some of session delivery, what it means to deliver a great service to our clients, a service that would make them, obviously want to sign up in the first place, and use personal training as a piece of their exercise program, but also to stay in that service long term, right? Not to just deliver service or to get results, but to drive referrals as well. So we're going to dive into some of the most important components of what it means to have great service, some of those session delivery principles, and then kind of see where it goes from there. So Tiger, kind of your overview of what good service looks like.
Yeah. So our last podcast, we went over conversion. And so I felt like it was only the next step. It's like, okay, I've signed somebody up. Now what? Right? Because your job's not done. This is actually when your job starts. This is the real part. We're in this business to help people. We talk about that a lot. And I think service is like a massive indicator of how successful you're going to be as a trainer with your business as a whole too. Because if you're not delivering results, you're not going to get referrals. Nobody's going to want to train with you very long. So your retention is going to be bad. So if you truly want to grow your business, and like increase your footprint, you have to focus a lot on actually giving quality sessions away. And so real quick, as like an excerpt, I think a little bit of a misinterpretation that we aren't going to be really talking about as much today that people might think we're going to talk about, is that people believe service is reliant on, purely biomechanic knowledge or having 10 specialized certifications, being a licensed nutritionist on top of their PT, all these other things. And at the end of the day, I don't think as much of that matters, because I think the true key ingredients to servicing a client well can be summed up in about 4 things. If we're just general overview: accountability, motivation, structure, and then knowledge, right? In that order, where knowledge actually ends up kind of being on the lower end of that thing. Would you agree with that?
100%. Most people are never going to need 99% of a really good trainer's knowledge base, right? Maybe bits and pieces over time, but it's truly not, that impactful, right, in each and every session. I think it's probably like a pendulum where it can swing too far one way or the other. You don't want to be so bro or so loose with your standards of training excellence that you'd hurt somebody, or you can't paint the vision of really growing. And on the other end, you don't want to be so like in tune with just the biomechanics and the exercise science and having a list of 30 certifications, but you're only helping 2 people a day.
Yeah,
right?
You're not helping enough, or you're like doing 10 sets per workout because you're spending an hour queuing one exercise.
And you get that where trainers quantify their value because I'm the best trainer, okay? And they're only training maybe 5 to 10 sessions a week. I think it's probably, it's all of these things. Like you said, it's making sure that you have the ability to influence and motivate them. You have the ability to, of course, deliver great programming, deliver a great session that's engaging and it's fun and it makes them want to come back rather than just making the client feel stupid and reliant on the trainer. It's a lot of those things. I think that's good.
Yeah, so we'll kind of gloss through these pretty quick, but as far as like accountability, what does that mean, right? To me, the greatest fault of a good trainer as opposed to a great trainer is ensuring training frequency and being accountable just to that. And so making sure that clients are never missing their sessions. They're always making up sessions that they've missed. This is going to result in like a higher income because it means that they're going to need more sessions quicker. But on top of that too, they're going to yield massive levels of results. I think if you've been in this business a little bit, you'll notice that the clients that are hitting their training frequency every single time and make up all their sessions, they make the most results. They by far make the most progress because they're having you there more often. They're working out more often. And so I think that's fantastic. And it will grow your business long term. And then on top of that, the trainers that don't have their own self-accountability, right? They kill their business and they kill their clients, right? So we'll have kill their clients figuratively. And so trainers that are like missing weeks or they'll take days off every now and then just because they feel like they need one, you're not holding your clients accountable to the standard that you hold yourself accountable to. If we work out every single day, right, which is one of our core values with our company, we can't expect our clients to miss workouts just because we don't feel like training somebody that day.
100%. There's that saying, consistency compounds, and it goes both ways, right? Consistency for the fitness professional. It's super important to stay consistent in everything that we do, to be the most consistent person in that in the client's life. because on their end, right, consistency is going to compound, right? You may not feel like it matters to miss a workout or miss your meals or tracking or this or that, but consistency always compounds both ways, either for good or for ill, if you will. So when clients are allowed to get into that habit where they're missing workouts over and over again, I mean, to their detriment, not just the trainer's income, but that person's going to, I mean, experience significantly less results or no results at all. And they're going to blame the trainer.
Yeah. How much quicker do those people cancel when they've missed their trainer for a month? That's like when I have a client that's missed for a week or two, like my stomach starts to sink. I'm like, I know it's coming. They're going to come back and say, hey, I don't feel like this is working. And then it's like, damn it, you know? So you have to be relentless on just being accountable with them, making sure they're working out. And that includes if they're on vacation or out of town. Hey, I'm going to send you a workout program. I want a picture that you're working out every day that you're gone or every other day when you're on vacation, and making sure that stuff gets done well too.
I think it's a great indicator of a great trainer and a trainer that's probably also earning great income, where if you look at a client's training frequency, let's say out over a longer time horizon, like over a year, right? If you have a client that's training twice a week, okay, you should be seeing 148 workouts, training sessions in that time period, right? Let alone all the other check-ins and workouts above and beyond that. Very often with trainers that you see are struggling and probably not delivering great results either, you're going to see that client that should have had 104 workouts with their trainer over the course of a year, maybe getting in 60, 70, right?
It can get really, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, but the client thinks that they're working out with their trainer twice a week, right? They're expecting that investment and they're expecting the return on that investment. And the trainer's like, oh yeah, I train that person 2 days a week, right? When in reality, we're training them closer to 1 day a week than 2, with big chunks of time in between.
Can you tell we've been dealing with this a little bit? So yeah, big piece, really important to focus on. Next up, we'll talk about motivation just real quick. We could probably spend an entire podcast talking about motivation, especially with this guy. I mean, I know that what you have some weird certification about. What is it? Something with motivation.
We're going to talk about certifications now.
Yeah, I know, right? You have something crazy. Andy's like a professional at getting people to do things that are greater than what they believe they can do. I don't know how he does that.
Only for their benefit. That sounded really manipulative.
Only for their benefit, of course. So motivation, like what's worked well for me personally is that I'm definitely somebody who's reliant on energy. I'm definitely an energy guy. So like when I'm in session, typically it's best practice to walk alongside your client. Andy, how many times do you see me walking alongside my client? Probably never, because I'm always walking in front of them.
Oh, okay.
And so like normally I'm walking backwards. I'm like, let's go, let's go, let's go. I'm moving everybody along. I like to walk really quick. I talk fast. I talk loud.
Yeah.
And it's some of it's fake. Like I'm tired. I did 15 appointments today, but my last guy walked in and I'm yelling, Frank, like let's go as soon as he walks in, because my goal typically is when they walk in, I want to see them smile the moment they see me.
Yep.
Right. And immediately provide like oh, this is going to be great. I'm here to see Tiger. So it's like the moment they walk in, I'm yelling their name. I'm smiling at them, talking about how excited I am to see them. I might even just like go give them a hug or something. And some of them I'm genuinely just love to see them. But at the same time, like sometimes I'm tired and I'm like, you know what? I got to do this. It's not for me. It's not about me. It's for them. So I need to provide that energy for them.
You give that energy to other people and it always bounces and comes right back to you. Oftentimes people are so they reserve that energy and then they just end up losing more of it. Where if you end up giving that energy to somebody else, there's something about it that always comes back to you. We talked about that with inspiration, where you inspire somebody else, you always find limitless inspiration for yourself. Same thing with motivating others. You motivate somebody, you're always going to come back. That motivation's always going to come back to you. Also, right, people, I mean, our clients don't know that, I mean, some of them do, that we deliver 60, 70, however many hours of personal training a week. Okay. But to them, they're only seeing you 1, 2, 3, 4 hours of their 168 hours in a week. We have such a great opportunity of being the best couple hours in that individual's week, where it's 100% about them. That's such great power, and with great power comes great responsibility, right? So we need to make sure that if we can't get over our own feelings of fatigue or whatnot. But I mean, to them, they don't know that. So we need to make sure that we put our best foot forward with every session.
And another big part about motivation that's worked well for me more over this past year than probably when I first started is ensuring that I'm leading by example. And that doesn't just mean working out myself. I think that is a big part of it. I think your fit trainers tend to be better trainers and have more clientele. So I think being fit's important. And we've seen where, we have a trainer making a lot of progress on their own fitness goals where their clients feel more motivated and they work harder. I think that's really important. But it goes past that too. And so like most of my clients do know that I'm doing about 60 to hopefully 70 sessions a week right now. Now, what examples does that provide for them? Well, it's like Tiger works out every day. Yep. Tiger works more hours than me, right? And I legitimately want them to know that because I think it gives them an example of like, okay, if he can do that, like I can do half of that, yep. And so it's like constantly trying to even push that agenda where I've seen clients have more integrity in their relationships or, put more energy into their business or into their company. Mm-hmm. And I see their work ethic, not only inside the gym grow, but outside the gym grow just because of the example that I'm leading by.
Yep.
So that's cool when you have a client who works for like a Fortune 500 company
mm-hmm.
and he's busting his ass at work the next day, even though he's way higher up in his company than you are, just because he sees how much work you're putting in.
I mean, essentially you're in a leadership position. I mean, as a trainer, you're leading your client, even though outside of the gym, that individual may be far more successful than you. In the setting and the scope of the gym, you're the leader, right? Mm-hmm. And there's that saying, what a leader tolerates in minimal amounts and accepts in minimal amounts, their follower is going to accept in excess. Okay, so I mean, if you're allowing inconsistency where you, let's say, cancel or move a session, right? It's weird. Now all of a sudden that client has permission to cancel and move 5 sessions, right? Mm-hmm. It's funny how it always works that way. It's not funny. It's unfortunately the way that it is.
The way they go.
Where they see their trainer missing workouts, right? Or coming in and they're tired, right? All of a sudden it's fine for them to be
tired when they come in. Yeah.
Right? Cranky, grumpy. Oh, this is complaint hour. Awesome. I'm gonna complain too.
Join me too.
Right?
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to turn that back to the positive. So it's really important to set that tone and keep that tone positive, solution oriented, upbeat, all about the results. I mean, every time.
Yeah. And having that level of planning kind of ties into our next part, which is workout structure. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that some people might not necessarily understand what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about perfect programs with perfect progressions to a degree, as much as I'm talking about having a game plan, not only when they walk in, but a game plan in general, right? Mm-hmm. I think having some sort of program, regardless of how extensive and perfect it is, something that you can progress and move forward each week is really, really important. Not only does it show that like we care enough to like spend extra time and like work on a game plan for them, it shows that the program that you're providing is individualized. You're not doing the same workout with all 9 of your clients for the day. We've seen that before mm-hmm. plenty of times. And then it just adds that level of professionalism where it's like, okay, this person knows what they're doing and they're always ready for me. And I mean, planning out our workouts ahead of time instead of just doing it on the fly every time.
For sure. I mean, preparation prevents poor performance, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm just like throwing out taglines today for some reason. Like it's January fatigue. But I mean, essentially, when you want to make sure that client feels cared for. And the worst thing in my mind that a trainer can do when someone walks in, so what do you want to work on today? Right? Then what am I paying you for? It's always the thought that goes through my head when I hear other trainers bring that up. But having a plan ahead of time, even if that's just a loose structure, because sometimes, I mean, you could have, again, the most beautiful progressed periodized program in the world, and someone walks in and they're like, man, I threw my back out this morning. I slept on my shoulder wrong. Like you can have a
goodbye to that program.
Right, come on. You can have a loose structure that can be fluid and adapt, and that's one of the benefits of their workouts with you as opposed to their workouts on their own that you might provide for them might not have as much flexibility. That might be always why they come and see you. Mm-hmm. So for me, I mean, I've always kind of had the same kind of session structure like laid out in my head. Mm-hmm. Tiger, I know that you do the same. So just as like a brief overview, and then I'd like to hear yours too. But for me, it's always some kind of movement prep, activation. Then it's getting into some kind of compound movements. Obviously, in that movement preps also includes something aerobic in nature to get heart rate up, get them moving and feeling good. Because again, if I can get them feeling good as a sole goal of a session, that's awesome. Especially if like your primary age of clientele is a little bit older, which at this point most of mine is. Mm-hmm. So getting them feeling better, sitting on the bike, I mean debriefing, letting them just like take a deep breath coming in from work or coming out of their week. Mm-hmm. Getting into some kind of compound strength movement where we're looking for some kind of strength stimulus, getting any weak point training or working on just, I mean, supporting lean body mass, what I'll call body armor, and then finishing with some kind of conditioning, core work, more functional-esque type training. And it always kind of has that same flow, and they expect it. So they're not coming in like anxious about what's my workout with my trainer going to be today. Is it going to be awful? Is he going to kill me? Right? Is he just going to come across something that he found randomly on the internet and make me go through it? Right? For the most part, no. Sometimes, yeah. But most of the time, it's going to be the same flow, so that they can come to expect it. Of course, it gives us a chance to progress too. So that's kind of my general flow. Tiger, what's yours?
Yeah. So I probably have 3 like different specific flows that I'd follow, and certain people line up in certain boxes. But like my general blueprint starts out very much the same. We do some sort of warm up, which is usually like, I call it priming, which I think it comes from Mind Pump, the podcast. Maybe.
Yeah.
And so they talk about like, again, activation drills, and then you do them at a velocity that allows them to increase their heart rate all at the same time. So you can kind of get the activation done, get the warm up done together. So we're not taking a lot of time. Again, we'll move into kind of a strength movement. A lot of the times I superset this with something that's not compromising, just because I think standing and looking at each other is weird. For some of my higher end athletes, we might stand there and look at each other. That's okay. We just take a rest time. Okay. But after that, everything is supersets. I think that's crucial. I don't know why people don't superset stuff. If you're not like, okay, then do minimal rest timing. Like, I don't know why we stand and look around.
Who said we can't superset with a mobilization, or we can't
could be
superset
anything.
with, I mean, some low grade cardio activity, right? Recovery. I feel like there's such a benefit, especially with a brand new client, of just building that aerobic base. I mean, that accounts for so much. I mean, such a quick change in how someone feels and how they function, how they recover, and all of those things. I feel like a lot of trainers leave that out early on.
Yeah. Well, the average client, and on my personal client roster, trains twice a week, right? And industry average is 1.5 times. So if you're only seeing somebody twice a week, I could spend an entire hour with somebody doing corrective exercise that they need, right? And so I can mix that corrective exercise in with the strength movements that they need, with the high intensity or higher paced movements that they need. And then I can tackle all my boxes in just an hour. So I think we always talk about 30 to 40 sets, like at a minimum. Like if you're in a workout, it's 30 to 40 sets. If you're doing less than that, you're probably not following a great program, at least for general public. And then for some of my athletes, usually by the time we get done, I'm like, hey, you have 20, 30 more minutes of volume you need to get in before you leave. And so I think that would be like my typical workout structures, ensuring pacing's really well done.
That exercise selection is crucially important. Something that I think about and coach about often with trainers is not all of our clients need the same exercise selection that like the trainer may need themselves in their programs or is just interested in, right? Your clients may not benefit just from a total volume perspective. If you only see them 2 days a week, you may not have time to spend 30 minutes on cleans and snatches and advanced kettlebell flows, or I mean, even some of like the really big bang for your buck compound movements. Of course, we love incorporating those, but sometimes that you just aren't going to get as good of an ROI with the time constraint that you have, right? When you have 5, 6, 7 workouts a week, right, you get a whole lot more flexibility. When you get maybe 2, 3 workouts a week, it's okay. How do I hit this plane of motion with adequate volume with the time that I have as quick as I can with other movements close by? And it's a lot more about the flow and the.
And I mean, there's great substitutions for barbell work, because I think that's where we see trainers get in the weeds the most, where it's like, well, I'm doing a barbell squat, I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you know, Judy's 55. She could probably do a goblet squat, and you can superset it with a million other things and keep the flow going, and she's still going to be wrecked by the end of the workout.
I don't need her wrecked, but I just need Judy to move her quads this week.
Yeah, exactly.
I need Judy to feel some load through her glutes and hamstrings this week.
Yeah. And every now and then, if you want to throw in a barbell, I mean, I had a 76-year-old deadlift 100 pounds. That was really cool. We did that one time. We don't deadlift anymore. We've done dumbbell deadlifts, so we can superset it with other movements that need to get done.
We have some that lift significantly more than that. It's just not, it doesn't always necessarily need to be the main focus, especially if they're not giving you 6-7 days a week.
Yeah.
So I think that's a super important point to hit home, is don't necessarily be so concerned with just hitting single movement patterns, but trying to hit everything. And in turn, you're going to see a mutual benefit if you were to ever come back and test those areas, right? Like we have, we have an 80 an 80-year-old nun, right, who deadlifts over 200 pounds. We don't deadlift that often, but we do a lot of things to help support her deadlift and help her keep her strong at 80 some years old. Probably having some of that variety in there keeps her well-rounded.
I agree with that. And we're already talking about knowledge at this point, like knowledge of some of the workouts and varieties and accessories and stuff. But when we're looking at knowledge from like an overview perspective, because we're going to move on to knowledge now, I think there's a couple like key things to focus on. Okay. And so I think the first like leading thing, and this might be taboo, but truthfully, again, I don't think your knowledge as far as biomechanics and stuff matters. Right. And so one thing we always prioritize ourselves is we want to be professional problem solvers. Right. And so when our clients come to us and give us a problem, we might not always know the answer, but you can bet your bippy, that's funny, that I'm going to know the answer by the next time you see me, right? And so I think that's a big focus where it's like, if your client comes to you and has a problem, it's like, I'm going to find the resource quicker, I'm going to understand it more, I'm going to deliver to you the answer that you need faster than you having to do it on your own, right? And then that's how you can really provide a lot of knowledge to your clients outside of just the biomechanical knowledge that you might have.
For sure. And I don't know if I'd say that it doesn't matter at all, but it's like to what degree and at what part that it's most important. Because oftentimes, I mean, most clients aren't fit to need our biomechanical knowledge, like we had talked about. It's a dial, not a switch. As far as with the educational component that you had just mentioned, I'm going to blank on my response to it. Say what you said at the last.
About like finding the information quicker than them?
Yes. Yeah. So as far as like a filter, this is one of the benefits that a lot of my clients look to me for is like they could go read a bunch of stuff online and read a bunch of studies. But one of the things, I mean, what a great well-rounded trainer provides for that individual is like a filter where they know you reading that scientific article or reading that whatever it is on the internet is going to give them significantly greater expertise than them reading it, right? Because they don't have the foundation of all your other knowledge. So I have clients sending me resources all the time, and this gets into the communication piece outside of the session. They're like, hey, what do you think of this? And they'll send me an article on a certain smartwatch that they want to buy their husband for Christmas, right?
Yeah.
Or they'll send me an article on this specific supplement that they found on Amazon, and they're like, hey, will this make my knee pain go away?
No.
They trust me to be that filter for them. And I think probably we're in an age where it's never been more important. I know that I'm not the first person to say this, but it's never been more important for the trainer to be like a well-rounded chameleon almost, like where we can adapt, and we need to be able to talk about all facets of fitness, not just back in the day where a trainer can be like, no, I'm just a prep coach. I just train bodybuilders, right? Yeah. Or no, I only train endurance athletes. I think it's really important for a trainer to be like, Tiger, you mentioned a professional problem solver where it doesn't matter what, because the client's goals are going to change. We need to be able to take them across the whole continuum of health and fitness.
Yeah. And some quick hitters on knowledge. Andy, you know this quote, but I don't, but I know how it starts. Regarding being a resource instead of providing resources. You understand? No, he's off. He's out.
It's January.
Big thing is sometimes instead of just providing the answers directly or providing like information to somebody, if you're trying to give them help on something that maybe they're not even asking help for yet, it's important sometimes to just provide a resource rather than being the resource yourself. And a lot of times that knowledge will transfer a little bit better. And so, like, for example, I had a trainer I was working with the other day, and we were hoping to encourage her to have a higher level of ownership on the success of her future business. Rather than hoping her business is successful, we wanted her to will it to be successful. So, like, force the success. And so rather than telling her that directly, I gave her some resources that she could go check out that would maybe help her come to that conclusion on her own. And sometimes that knowledge is transferred better. Other big things, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I've said it on a podcast before. I'm going to say it again. So that's something to keep in mind. And then on top of that, one thing that we see a lot from maybe some veteran trainers is where they may have learned something new or learned that what they had previously thought was correct was wrong. And they decided that they weren't going to deliver the new information because they felt like it would platform them in a way. So don't let your ego be the reason that good never becomes great, right? So be willing to admit that you're wrong and make an adjustment. I can't tell you how many times I've told a client just today, like, actually, that was wrong. Let's do it the other way. Or, you know what? I don't have an answer for this right now, but next week when you come in, I'm going to have an answer. I had a guy with a massive shoulder issue probably 2-3 months ago, and I tried everything I knew, and I'm like, dude, I don't know how to fix this. I'm going to send you to my massage therapist. And I sent him over. I paid for the massage therapist, right? So he could go see her, and he was, the next day, he was better. And so sometimes letting yourself sit back and be like, look, I just don't have a solution will actually build so much amounts of rapport that they're going to trust you moving forward on the stuff that you do know, because you're willing to admit the stuff that you don't know.
They're going to trust you on the big things.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to get caught up in the minor things where like, hey, I heard this on the news, therefore I don't trust you about anything else that you can possibly help me with. Like actually work out on a consistent basis. But I want to go back because I one of the things that you said, I don't want it to come across as like a competing idea, where you want to also, of course, like inspire resourcefulness if you're working with a peer. But if you're providing a resource to a client, as opposed to like being a filter for resources from them, but you're providing them with a resource, right? A lot of times trainers are scared of like referring and sending people to either other professionals or giving them other sources of information where they're like, oh, they may not need me if they like have access to this other resource, which of course is nonsense. But just because it came from you, you now become more powerful or more knowledgeable, more important to that person just by extension. Mm-hmm. So they become under your umbrella of influence. So just something I wanted to touch on real quick.
Oh, I think that's important. All right, we're moving on. Okay, so we've done our brief overview. So what's next?
So as far as like actually delivering sessions, we've already talked a little bit about the session structure, but I think it's really, really key if we're looking at not just, building an adequate personal training business where we're making an okay living, but excelling, trying to get into the top 1% of our field. I think if you walk into a club, it's very easy to pick out like who the busiest, best trainers are in the club. And it's not necessarily always, again, like we said, the ones with the most amount of certifications on the bio wall, or the most biomechanically sound sessions even. But there's a certain way that a session is delivered that I think is an indicator of a top performing trainer, and maybe a B level, right, or C level trainer. I know that makes it sound bad, right? But there's a certain way that an A level trainer trains that's obvious. Mm-hmm. What do you think some of those characteristics are, Tiger?
You could go over like the very simple things, like being off of your cell phone. They're actually in their uniform. They're not talking to everybody else on the gym floor but their client. Those like general basics that we skip over a lot of time, or later in our careers we might rationalize them as being okay. Make a massive difference just in overall gym presence. So one thing that I still love to this day, I made 2 today. I booked 2 appointments off of the gym floor today. So I did 15 appointments. While I was training, I had 2 people come up to me and talk to me, or I went and talked to them just real briefly, like in passing, and I scheduled them for a session to meet up. But the reason I can do something like that is because when I'm training somebody, I'm solely focused on my client. I'm in tune with everything they're doing. I'm sitting close to them. If they're on the ground, I'm on the ground with them on a knee. I'm watching everything they're doing perfectly. There's a famous story that you told me a long time ago, and I really took to heart, where our current VP in our company had a newer trainer watching him coach just leg press, 1 set of leg press. And he walked up to our VP after and was like, I understand why you can charge X amount per session just from watching that 1 set. And it was like, man, if you can tell that on 1 set, what are the other people in the gym thinking when you're taking a set off and you're texting? It's like, I better be on it for every single set my client does and locked in.
For sure. We use an exercise often where, hypothetically, let's say if we were to charge $200 a session, right? Or some amount that's a multiple above what you're currently charging, what would that session and level of service have to look like? Okay. And you nailed a lot of the things on the head as far as like how that professional would carry themselves differently. They look like they charge $200 a session. And I don't just mean in physical fitness, but from their entire appearance, right? They wouldn't be walking around with dirty shoes with holes in them. They wouldn't be walking around with their hair looking like they just like rolled out of bed. They wouldn't have a hat on their head looking like they didn't even bathe, right?
I haven't done the hat thing, but I've done the other 2.
None of these are personal attacks, I swear. No, I'm kidding. And that's not that's not you as you've progressed in your career. And a lot of times we do see trainers outgrow these things that early on they take for granted because they want to progress in their career. They're like, oh, like I used to think $60 a session was unattainable, right? So I just dressed like I was worth $10 a session. As you take your career more seriously, of course, it pays you back dividends as well.
And you see it go the other way too,
100%.
where people's business starts shrinking and they start skipping over these general basics.
Yeah.
We always talk about like how you do one thing's how you do everything, right? I'm like, if I don't brush my teeth in the morning, my training sessions are going to suck. Like it's the little things that pile up. And so it's like, I can't skip tying my shoes anymore, which was a big one when I first started. I'd never tied my shoes. And so those little things, I mean, those are really good points, Andy. Really good.
So as far as the session delivery, the other items, like you mentioned, body positioning, I think that's huge. So the actual session quality needs to be top notch, worth $200 a session or whatever that hypothetical amount is for you. It has to be delivered like a $200 session. So everything from the appearance to the communication to the energy. I thought that was great that you hit on earlier. I mean, another component to service that we talked about and coach about often is how do we influence the other 160 some hours that we're not with our client, right? How do we communicate with them outside of session? How do we become as omniscient and omnipresent as possible in our clients' lives in order to influence a whole lifestyle that changes their life forever, as opposed to just in the couple hours a week that you work with them? So, Tiger, what are some of the ways that you interact and communicate with your clients outside of session?
Yeah, so this one's one that I struggle with personally. I probably always have. And I remember, like, I've gotten better at it. Otherwise, my ceiling would have hit me harder, right? And so I remember early on, a lot of my clients that trained at a lower frequency, because I like to do reviews, so I'll ask my clients, like, hey, what's things I could do better? At one point, I asked all my clients, like, hey, if I was going to charge $100 a session, what does the session need to look like? Like, what do I need to change? And so one thing that had came back to me a lot and still comes back to me a lot is, hey, I wish you like communicated with me more, whether that be through text, phone calls, checked how I was doing over the weekend, or checked on how I did with my own workouts. And so when I was at, let's say 20 clients, like that became tough for me. I'm still pretty bad about responding to all my texts, but over time, what I've realized is that I have clients that train at a lower frequency. They need to hear from me more often. So, and you'll kind of feel this if you're getting started out, where it's like, man, I feel like I haven't seen you in a week, well, it's been a week, but it feels like it's been 2 or 3 weeks, right? And it's like, okay, I need to make sure I reach out to that client a little bit more often. So it might be just be texting them and asking them how their day's going. It doesn't necessarily have to be something regarding their program or regarding exercise, where it's just interaction in general, because they associate you with exercise. So if I reach out to my client and say, hey, how was work today? I know you said you had a busy day. They're like, oh shit, I need to work out today. So those little things, reaching out to those people just through text, will do a lot for them in terms of their overall results later on.
For sure. And I didn't think about this until a few of the things that you mentioned, but this was something that actually started when I was a trainer, how I operated this. But what I would do is each day on my contacts list, where I'd be looking at future business, I'd have my list at the bottom of my current clients, and I'd have just a space next to them where I would put either like a note of an interaction or a training session that day, but I also just put a little check that I had some kind of interaction with that person, whether it just be a text, maybe it was a note on their program, maybe it was sharing them a resource or something, or it was making sure I liked one of their posts on Facebook back when I was better about social media. I'm awful about all of that, but just some kind of interaction on a regular basis, because even if they, let's say, saw me like something of theirs on Facebook, right? Just because of what they associate me with, right? They're thinking about, that's my workout guy, right? And how's my workout today? It just keeps it on their brain, which I think is so important, is how we create that connection ongoingly. Because those are the kind of connections too that lead to some of, I mean, at least speaking for myself personally, some of my closest friends are my clients, right? I think we talked about this in another podcast, so I don't want to beat it over the head, but that outside of the session communication is so important. So to this day, I still keep a list every day in kind of my like daily to-do list, daily agenda of all the people I want to deliver value to that day. And most days it's the same, right? And that's feedback that I get from a lot of people is, man, like, you reach out to me every day. I'm like, yeah, it's not like me just magically remembering. It's because I have your name written down on a piece of paper. It makes it a whole lot easier to remember to reach out and just be like, hey, how I can be valuable to you today? How can how can I be more valuable? And the more valuable you are to other people, the more value they give back to you in return.
Yeah, I think that's good. I'm gonna have to adopt that myself because like I said, it's something I need to work on. One thing that I think works well as far as communication, one thing that sometimes I just barely trip over too is if you see a client in the club, like don't ignore them. And you don't know how often I see that, but I know personally I have a really high self workout frequency with my clients. Like my clients work out on their own very frequently, but we'll see other people, their clients come in and work on their own, and the trainer doesn't say anything to them. And it's like, just go give them a fist bump. Like go say like, hey, good job. Like I'm glad you're here. That goes a long way. And if you don't say anything at all, it really rubs them the wrong way. I've had clients be very upset with me in the past about that. You have something you want to say?
What that reminded me of, it's typically those same individuals, those same trainers that don't like returning texts or communicating outside of sessions because they're not paying for that time, like it's like they create so much separation. Right?
I forget that's a thing that people don't answer their phone when they're not at work. Like even that rule in itself, like blows
the thing
my
is
mind.
When they're on their phone, right? When there's still hours and hours of screen time, and again, this isn't personal or necessarily geared towards anybody.
It might be. I'm just playing.
No, but like when I know there's probably people struggling with anxiety about it, where it could be solved so easily just by thinking about other people, right? The greatest way of overcoming that selfishness and that anxiety that's all the implosion is taking that energy and putting it outwards and servicing other people. Like we talked about earlier, that inspiration and motivation out only comes back and gives you, peace of mind from knowing that you did the best that you're capable of, John Wooden, and then motivation and inspiration for yourself.
I think we could do a whole podcast about like production versus consumption too, which would be awesome too, where we kind of talk about something like that. And then another like quick best practice that I personally have, and I think this is one of the reasons I have such a good workout frequency with my clients on their own basis, is I call it the interruption policy, where if a client comes into the gym while I'm working with another client and they're going to work out on their own, they're allowed to interrupt any of my sessions at any time to come ask me a question regarding their workout for the day or a specific movement. And I make sure that all my clients are aware of this so that they feel, usually this helps them participate. I'm like, hey, like as long as you don't have any problems with this, then you can come up and do it too.
Yeah.
And so everyone's cool with it.
It's fair across the board.
It's fair across the board. But it allows, my clients now meet each other and interact. So there's some community feel. There's less pressure with coming to the gym on their own because they know, because I'm always there. So that's helpful. They know that they're going to have help if they need it in the moment. And so I think that's like a really good best practice that we can encourage, because then they're not paying you for the 1 hour they're seeing you. They're paying you for the overall experience and everything that you have to offer.
The community that you've created. So yeah, it's great when you can become friends with your clients, but if you can have your clients become friends with each other, then they never ever leave, right? If you can team them up into any kind of group training or anything like that, I mean, they hold each other accountable. It's almost like peer pressure, like that much more, even more so than the trainer to client relationship.
And you're not charging $120 an hour. That's just not real. You're charging $120 to see them one time, or maybe it's 2 times, so it's $240. But then they're paying for the extra level of programming, the extra level of communication, all those extra recommendations, phone calls, text, all of that entire experience is what they're paying for. So to put that in a 1 hour time span, I'm going to be willing to guess you're not going to charge $120. It's just not going to happen.
They're paying for your influence on their entire life, which is very challenging to measure. Could be infinite. But I mean, broken down over the course of like a week, right? Or even a day, right? It could be, I mean, a small amount, 10, 20, 30 bucks a day to have massive impact on everything that they do. So really important. So I think that kind of sums up the service component. I mean, both in delivery, some of the overview, I think that was really good. So a couple action items and some questions that we always ask ourselves, reflect kind of in reflection. I know we mentioned one already, right? If we were to charge significantly more than what we're charging right now, let's say $200 a session, what would that level of service need to look like in the gym, in the session, out of the gym? And then if you are looking at it from a business growth perspective, if your current clients were your only opportunity for future clients, What would that level of service need to look like? How would you motivate referrals? Be so good that they can't possibly not tell their friends and family about you, as opposed to just like holding you to themselves. So two questions that I think, asked with some good honesty and self-reflection can yield great returns in your business.